Good morning. Let's make our way to our chairs. We're going to get started. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. Sorry for the later start. Our intrepid AV expert, Brandon Watterson, who you all should know if you ever need that type of expertise, but he got caught behind the tractor that lost the trailer at the 52 and 15. So he made it. We're running a little bit late. We're going to blast through the announcements and then get to our speaker here in just a second. So I'm going to be cutting things short. Certainly a couple things to note. Our December 6th meeting is with Jenny Bratt and Helen Chang of Withers Worldwide. And they're going to be presenting on year-end charitable planning and other charitable planning opportunities around the charitable giving world. Upcoming events beyond that is January 3rd. We're having a change on that one. So that's to be determined. But our February meeting is going to be a presentation with Doug Wilson of Douglas Wilson Companies and Brett Albrecht of Kramer Land Company, presenting on the state of real estate, the real estate economy in San Diego, California, and across the nation. March 3rd, we've got Dawn Hall Caneen of Caneen and Booth, who's going to be heading a panel on what the estate planners could learn from the estate administrators and litigators. April 4th, we're fine tuning. May 2nd, we've got Steve Akers of Bessemer Trust, famous for his musings from Heckerling, which is, a fantastic summary that he puts together. But it's his presentation is going to be current thoughts on estate and charitable planning. Let's see, certainly go to the website and take a look at that. David Jacobs has done a bang up job with pulling that together and always improving it. Pete Tentler, who heads up our trifectas. We're going to just quickly blast through. Certainly put your cards out. Pete's got the bowl. And it's a great way, we have a shorter networking time here at our meetings. So this a meeting of 3 or 4 people, breakfast, lunch, coffee, what have you, is a great way to get to know people and develop the relationships a little bit more deeply. Our board is, myself, David Jacobs, Phil Sullivan with Sullivan McGibbons, and Crickard is here. Pete Tentler's on the board, Barry Levine of Northern Trust. Without any further ado, I want to bring up Valerie Medina, who will talk about, who's our sponsor for today. She's with Trust Properties USA, and Valerie, it's all yours.
Thank you, everyone. I have to look at the slide presentation here. So my company is Trust Properties USA. We are a probate and trust real estate company. We specialize in trust and probate real estate. My name is Valerie Medina. And so we have a unique value proposition. I call it the family flip. And we do this in 3 simple steps for each estate, each home that we sell. So we front the money, so it's 0 upfront cost to the estate. We don't charge any points or fees. We flip the family home and then we sell it at fair market value. So the flip really increases the equity And by the time it's sold, that estate or the trust gets to keep all the equity. We just charge the realtor commission at the end, at the close of escrow. So the people we help are professionals. So many of our referrals come from estate planning attorneys, CPAs, professional fiduciaries, financial planners, assisted living and elder care professionals. And the clients we help, anyone who inherits a property that can benefit from our services at no upfront cost. So our services include, I mean, we're a one-stop shop. We do everything, but some of the featured services here, we'll do a full renovation on the property, whatever it needs. It could be, you know, kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, pools, roofs. We do evictions and lockouts. When we get the estate or the property, someone may be living in it and the beneficiaries don't want them there. We de-hoard, so we'll do, that one is a popular one. So we will do an estate sale, or we'll just do a trash out. And we do donate some items that the estate may want donated rather than just trashed out. Right now, we're doing a lot of foreclosure avoidance. So many of the properties are facing foreclosure right now. So if that's the case, call us. We do have some remedies with that. We do secure the property, and a lot of the homes we get don't have homeowner insurance. If they're completely paid off, a lot of times they're not even insured. So we'll put that property insurance in place before we start working on it. So again, we don't charge any interest points or fees. We just charge a regular commission at the close of escrow. So all the money that we provide is fronted and then reimbursed at the close. Here's a couple of case studies. This property was in San Diego. This one took place about 3 years ago. It had, I mean, these pictures don't even show the hoarding. This is after the trash out. So the before and after, it's just life-changing to the beneficiary. He thought it was a tear down. And by the way, there was about 20 drug addicts living in the house that we had to evict prior to doing the trash out. So it was very contentious, and they kept breaking back into the house, and we had to just get all of this done to sell the house. And it was extremely stressful for the administrator. And then at the end, he just gave us a wonderful 5-star review, which I won't read, but it'll be on the screen, and you have it in your flyer. So, by the way, the added gain on this estate was over 100 grand. So it was just in terrible condition. It would have gone for pennies on the dollar had it not been repaired. It's going to show you right here. Yeah, so we fronted over 120 grand. Yeah, so there was, thank God there was not a mortgage lien on this property. The as-is value, I was being generous saying 400 grand. I feel like it definitely would have gone lower just because of all the issues. You know, it not only had deferred maintenance, but there were city violations, and it was just a big mess. But that's my profile client. We like the messes. So here's the 5-star review. This administrator really honestly thought this house was a tear down and that they would just have a complete loss. So they were pleasantly surprised at the end, and we do like happy endings. I have one more case study for you. This one's in Claremont, sold it earlier this year. There was a death on the property, lots of stuff. It wasn't really a bad hoarding situation, but you can continue. You can see and then the difference, you know, we make them look real pretty. Everybody wants white, stainless steel, grays, lights, light colors. And in this case, I'll give you some figures here. This property, the added gain was over 200,000. This property was sold at the height of the market, so it was really nice. The market's really not there right now today, but we were able to sell it for over 1.1 million. We fronted over 100K again. This property had a reverse mortgage on it, and so it was really critical to do the repair and add equity. Otherwise, by the time the reverse mortgage was paid off and all the fees were paid, there wouldn't have been anything left for the beneficiary, who was the family dog. So our offices, we are in the state of California. You can see the darkened areas. We've got Inland Empire, Ventura, I'm San Diego, LA, Greater Sacramento. So if you have any properties in other counties, reach out to me. I'll put you in contact with the right person. And lastly, for professionals, we offer grant deeds and desktop evaluations. If you need any date of death BPOs or current valuations, we're glad to do it. We can put you in connection with a grant deed system if you want to pull those on your own. And I think that's it. I'm Valerie. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Bill.
Valerie, thanks so very much. It's really great to have a solution that families can take advantage of when they're dealing with the passing of a loved one. And of course, it sounds like the bigger the challenge, the better. Without really any further ado, I want to introduce you to Dustin Nichols. He's a partner of Brown and Streza LLP in Irvine, a fine firm. You should know them. There's a handout piece on the firm itself. And you should have the PowerPoint that Dustin's going to speak over, as well as an article that was in the Bloomberg BNA system. Not getting too far just to get him up here. The thing really to note is Dustin was the inventor / technician that developed the proprietary private retirement trust and provides administrative support platform for the residents of the state of California. He's clearly an expert. He's on top of all the nuances, addressed many questions that passed muster with the court. So without any further ado, Dustin Nichols.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate the astounding introduction. Dennis Waitley, a famous writer and author, writer and speaker, motivational speaker. He said that health, wealth, and time are three precious assets that we truly fail to recognize and appreciate until they've been depleted. And with that, thank you for having me. And today we're going to speak about the private retirement trust, a benefit to living in California besides the weather. One more. So let me talk a little bit about my firm, because I'm fortunate to be around what I consider to be the best and the brightest minds in the business. And our emphasis at the firm, it's really three main practice areas. We do business planning, tax planning. We have a robust M&A group led by one of our senior partners, Vince Lepore. He's done some amazing deals. I've never seen anybody work like he does. And I'm fortunate to be in the business department as well as an integrated estate planner. And we have a full division that does nothing but private retirement trusts for our clients. And we also have a robust charitable sector. We do a lot of private foundations, represent charitable organizations, religious organizations. And last but not least, estates and trusts, do a lot of advanced tax planning, estate planning, with thinking more about just the money, right? It's always more than just the money. It's about passing on what matters, the values, the family values, along with the wealth. So I don't really like talking about myself. So we won't spend a lot of time on this slide. You can read it on your own if you have any questions. I consider myself blessed to have the opportunity to be up here speaking to you guys about something that I think can do some real good for folks. All right. Now, before I get into exemption planning, I'm going to lay a little bit of the landscape, the legal landscape in the area. There were 40 million lawsuits filed in the United States last year. Over 65% of those were filed in New York and California. So we are one of the most, or the most actually, litigious states. In fact, the American Tort Reform Foundation elected us the #1 judicial hellhole in the nation. This is a publication they put out. It's called America's Judicial Hellholes, and it goes into in depth exactly why it is that we are considered number one. And let me just name a few characteristics that put us there. AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, that makes everybody and their dog an employee. Which obviously gives rise to wage and hour litigation. Impaga claims. We also are well known for our minority shareholder litigation. We're also well known for Med-Mal, Prop 65, ADA, asbestos. All of those things added up puts us in that number one spot. Now you add that with a growing pile of distressed debt, signaling default wave that's in the making, which we just heard from our astounded real estate expert who just verified that there is an uptick in the bankruptcy cycle, but it's all just advance for showing that we're going into distressed times. And so the best time to plan to protect wealth is not when something's happened. It's well before, in advance of anything that's pending, threatened, or expected. And so I'm not done yet. Back up. Sorry. That was a long-winded introduction into exemption planning because, it's like, what can we do? What's out there? Right now, everyone's heard of asset protection. This is not asset protection, although it's the best non-asset protection, asset protection. Why do I say that? Because we're not doing conventional, traditional transfer planning. We're utilizing state-created rights known as exemptions. Right? We all have heard of O.J. Simpson before, and why it is that he left California and moved to Florida wasn't because the weather was better, but it was because they have a whole slew of robust creditor exemptions over there that once you're a resident of that state, it's a state created right that you can take advantage of, an unlimited homestead. You buy a house for $1 billion, as long as the money wasn't procured from some unlawful source, then that's 100% protected from creditors and money judgments. Same with life insurance, annuities. Yeah, it's a great place, a great state to live, but it gets awfully humid. There's a lot of mosquitoes. So I don't know about you, but I like California a lot better. Being a transplant from the East Coast myself, never left. Did not want to go back when I left the snow in Boston. But it is a safer, a more effective solution than traditional planning. Well, why? Because again, they're created by the state. These are carve-offs that the legislature in their infinite wisdom decided we were going to take certain asset categories, attributed a certain amounts to those asset categories and call them exempt, meaning untouchable by money judgments. Every state uses them. Every state has different amounts. And if you use them, strategically, creatively, you can, create a protected landscape for retirement and not disrupt the client's world and how they do things. And that's one of the things we don't like to do. We want to try and keep everything in the hands of our clients to do the great job that they do building their monster, their wealth. So you have to ask yourself, have you maximized, have you utilized all of the available creditor exemptions that are available to you? And especially if you live here and you're a resident of the state of California. Next, please. So the private retirement trust exemption, one of its kind, doesn't exist anywhere else in the nation other than California. So we have something actually to be proud of, right? And a lot of people are moving out and saying, we're going to move to another state. And it's funny, I hear buzz from a lot of doctors, I think, that are doing the Nevada, California game, and they residents of Nevada to get the tax benefits. But the reality is they're more concerned about the lawsuits than they are about the savings and taxes, which I found interesting. Although taxes is something that they care about, asset protection, or I should say, wealth preservation is definitely on the top of the list. Now, the PRT exemption can be found in the California Code of Civil Procedure, section 704.115B. And basically, this statute tells us that all the amounts that it holds, in other words, and you're going to be repetitive a little bit today. You might hear me say things multiple times. It's because I want to resonate a point. All right. And there are some points to be made here, but the amounts to be held are determined by what can be proven up necessary for retirement need. And that's a process. And we're going to talk about that process, but all amounts in it. Now, all the distributions at the time of retirement that come out, those are exempt, and the death benefit. So here we have a vehicle that exempts, protects money that we've proven up we can put in it that's necessary to maintain a lifestyle for our clients, basically end of their lives, age 95 for actuarial purposes. And the money coming out at retirement set up, usually separate into separate distribution accounts to retain the exemption, never commingle it with non-exempt stuff. Right, but that money coming out, it could be 8 judgments around a person, doctors, people in high risk industries, or just the ordinary folks out there that are driving on the freeways. Right, you don't realize what kind of liability that is, and can create. And if you die, if you were, God forbid, in an accident, and it was your fault, and somebody else passed away as a result of that, and the estate brought a claim against you for wrongful death, or you should say brought a claim against your estate, the wealth you've built for your family, then that death benefit associated with the PRT cannot be touched by money judgments either, even after you're gone, which is a pretty powerful statement. Next, please. So the purpose of the PRT exemption, like other exemptions, is to protect a debtor from his or her creditors and provide him or her the basic necessities of life. In this case, the basic necessities of life are the lifestyle to maintain for that particular retiree. And it allows, unlike traditional transfer asset protection planning, it really allows for a process to identify legitimate retirement assets. In other words, cash flowing assets that maybe don't fit into other traditional planning, other traditional retirement planning, ERISA planning, and can, provide that retirement benefit through mortality, right? With those are identified potentially as exposed personal assets that can be what we call purposely converted to exempt private retirement assets. That's a process, right? And it's kind of, well, the minute we've identified it, we've modeled it, and we show that it's going to produce a benefit for it, then it's a conversion from that non-exempt to exempt, from unprotected balance sheet to the protected balance sheet. And what makes these different than any other really process in the law is that exemptions have to be construed in a light most favorable to the debtor. And that's California Supreme Court case. That's the Dudley case. And that was affirmed in the Ninth Circuit. And what that means is when you read these cases, and that's what got me into this, is you'll find the court looking to bend over backwards to try and make these sometimes egregious, stretches of an attempt to protect things work. And, obviously got my attention. And we don't promote abuse, but at the same time, what it does do is give you cause for pause to take a look at, well, why? Why is this treated any differently than anything else? And well, it's because the state decided that it was going to do that these are carve-offs, and we're going to look at those differently. We're going to treat them differently when they're adjudicated in court. Next page, please. So to get the exemption, the PRT has to be designed and used for retirement purposes. It has to be held by a plan and distributed from that plan to be 100% exempt. Now, like everything, there are exception creditors, right? And what are the exception creditors? These make sense. These are public policy exceptions, IRS, family support, child support, spousal support. So we can't escape those liabilities using the PRT. Now, the protection benefits, next slide, please. If properly set up, created under the right conditions and administered, the PRT can protect assets from bankruptcies and civil judgments. Now, what that means is here in California, we have 2 systems of judgment enforcement. We have bankruptcy and non-bankruptcy. In both contexts, this particular exemption applies. Now, it protects all plan values and growth during accumulation. So as it's growing inside of the PRT, those values are protected. And we can even protect future contributions using what I call a PRT defined benefit funding agreement. And this is a neat little tool because the law favors funding of the PRT in 2 components. 1, some lump sum, and 2, some gradual accumulation over time. Okay, which means maybe a promise from yourself to fund your PRT, but the PRT trustees, he's concerned that he wants to make sure that he gets the benefit to be able to perform at retirement and paying that retirement benefit to a participant. So he takes security against that promise. And typically that security will, well, create a lien on a principal residence on a house that is in excess of the homestead exemption, because we'll never impair the homestead exemption. We have a nice new robust homestead exemption here in California. A minimum of 300,000, maximum of 600,000, adjusted for inflation every year. And it depends on the county that you live in and the median price of a single family home from the year before. So yes, that put a lot of work in my lap, but we know every single county's exemption, and here down in San Diego, it's 626,000 now. They adjusted it already for inflation, but we never impair that. And then any mortgage. So we look at the mortgage, look at the homestead, and we see what's left. And that's still low hanging fruit to a potential creditor. And so it actually works into a function. It protects the asset from, well, outside creditors. And at the same time, it secures, and more importantly, primarily, it secures the contributions to ensure that the PRT gets what it needs when it's time. So it is a neat little tool. And it can also lien other, what we call personal use assets that aren't appropriate to fund it directly into the PRT to create the benefit. Now, there has to be, well, some continuing protection. So we get that in the form of the distribution exemption under this exemption, the continued protection of planned funds, and the death benefit, like we talked about before. So again, those three things are protected using the PRT. Additional features, please. So again, the treatment under the law, when we're funding the PRT, and there are cases that back this up, that say when we've proven up these assets necessary for retirement, we're funding this particular exemption as provided by statute, that it's considered a recharacterization of assets versus a fraudulent conveyance. So in some cases where a creditor might reach back, they can reach back up to 6 years under UFTA, the Uniform Voidable Transactions Act. It's not a friendly act. It's there to protect creditors more than it is to protect you. So we have the exemption versus the threat, but at the same time, we're smart, we're mindful about timing and doing all of this stuff. But just even the fact that something might try to come back later and some creditor make a claim that, well, when you did this, you should have known about me. In a lot of situations, and the cases seem to indicate that, well, it's treated differently when you fund an exemption. It's a recharacterization, and it's not fraud per se. It's what they call a purposeful conversion from non-exempt to exempt. In the Stern case, it's a Ninth Circuit case, actually held that. And so because our plans allow for trust loans, there's an ability to maintain some cash flow, maybe back into the business, as long as, again, we don't tip the PRT sideways and it can't financially perform when it's supposed to, but loans are available pursuant to the language of the documents. And that's important because the cases are, well, if you have a loan regime, you got to follow it. And that's important. We don't have ERISA plan penalties. This is a non-qualified plan. So the limits, the rules, restrictions, and penalties that are typically associated with ERISA planning, they do not exist in this space. So therein, we also don't have participation requirements. We can offer it just to the business owner. We can offer it to multiple executives. It's a great golden handcuffing technique because you can set your vesting schedules, everything else for those employees and give them another benefit. And the client, through what we call a nestor, which is a financial advisor. So financial advisors, this is for you, can help to direct the plan assets. So through the clients, through your policy statements, everything else. And that's important because there is a control aspect to this. We have to be removed from the client. The clients are trustees. The clients have too much control over the trust itself. Then we blow a couple of great features of the PRT, which includes the spendthrift nature of the trust. And under the bankruptcy code, a spendthrift trust is excluded from bankruptcy, excluded, as opposed to just exempt, which is powerful. So we want to be able to maintain that, and control will destroy it under the anti-alienation provisions. I don't want to get too technical, but that would kill it. That's why the clients are never the trustees and don't have too much control. And it also has to do with retirement purpose. The closer the client is directly to the trust, the less retirement purpose it has, and it's deemed more like an asset protection tool, right? And well, those don't fly here in California too well. I can tell you, because I'm not just a planner, I'm a litigator, and I've litigated cases where asset protection trusts were involved in the courts. You know, there's an inherent disdain towards them because they feel, the judges feel like the only reason that they're created is to avoid a rightful entitlement of a creditor. There was a case down here in San Diego, the Kilker versus Stillman case, back in 2014, where just the mere transfer of an asset to a Nevada asset protection trust in advance of any problems was still considered fraud per se, because the judge said, we don't like these. There's only one use for them, and I'm not going to honor it. Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's a minority opinion, but it just kind of gives you an idea of where things could be heading. So better to be safe, better to be more effective in your thinking and your planning. And the PRT is tax neutral. Okay. There's some variations of something like a PRT out there that tries to obtain a tax benefit. And to me, that just puts us in the crosshairs of the IRS. And frankly, not interested in doing that. I think this is effective enough on its own, and there's ways to obtain tax benefits within it because it is 100% tax neutral. It's disregarded as a tax tool. So for what does that mean? It means that it's just you. If you're the person setting it up, you're the participant. It is an employee grantor trust under the code 677 of the Internal Revenue Code. And it just means that PRT can do things that you could personally obtain some tax benefits from, tax credits from solar. Maybe there's cost segregation study that's conducted in real estate that was funded into the PRT, and goes on and on. There's those things that you could have ordinarily done individually can be done in the PRT. It makes sense, and you can obtain tax benefits that way. Next slide, please. So the process at Brown and Streza, we have a three-pronged process, or phases, if you will. Phase one is our due diligence engagement. If you know anything about Brown and Streza, we don't do anything without doing due diligence first. That's a absolute must. And that gives us an opportunity to not only get our arms around what's going on and what we should be thinking about and evaluating, but we also built an exemption assessment calculator that takes the client's balance sheet, runs it through logarithms that we created that populate the current exemption amounts by asset category. It spits out a 2-page report. And I'll get into that a little bit more because I'm going to talk about it again. So I don't want to get too in depth on it. But this is also the phase that we look at any litigation that might be pending, threatened, or expected. And we make sure that if there is litigation, and I'll talk more about that as well, that we handle it properly. Phase two, that's where the client's had a chance to vet us. We've had a chance to look and assess the client. And if it looks like a good fit, then we'll implement and create the PRT. And that requires a retirement appraisal. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is, but that gives us an idea of how much we can fund. So we learn how much the retirement need is. That's our retirement appraisal. It's a report. And then we fund with the particular assets that we've identified are the appropriate assets to go into the PRT that will create that retirement benefit at retirement. In phase three, these have to be administered. And it's because they're non-qualified, there's less arduous compliance requirements, the filings that you would normally have with the ERISA plans. But there's still maintenance, right? We produce a benefit statement every year. There's an annual review, and we have our trustees, and we have a trust protector. I'm going to go through with all of that, but the point is that these are annually administered. Now, just so we're clear, and you're going to see this again, is these are created by a company, these PRTs, not individuals. It says not self-settled trusts. Those are illegal in California, I should say, unenforceable. And so we're very mindful that this is a corporate sponsored plan created by a company, initially funded with some money into the PRT to make it a business sponsored retirement plan, but it also renders all the expenses, all the costs associated with the creation, implementation, the due diligence too, and the admin is all tax deductible by the company and should be paid for by the company. All right, next page, please. Exemption analysis. So this is at the first stage we were talking about, and what we're trying to figure out in this person's portfolio and their balance sheet, what's protected, what's already got some exemption protection, what doesn't. And so also that incorporates income. We have to know how much the client is making, how much their total net worth is, and what the horizon might be to retirement. That allows us to create this report that does two things. One, isolates and identifies the pre-PRT exposure In other words, page 1 is your creditor exposure report. And that's going to show you if a creditor came after you today, when they put their little glasses on and they look at your balance sheet and they go, red, low hanging fruit. We'll go after that first. Yellow has some limited protections, meaning there's some corporate protections. Maybe it's charging order protections because you got limited partnership interests or multiple member LLCs or buy-sell agreement. And some things that maybe create some roadblocks, but they're really not exemption protections. They're just in the way. And if pushed hard enough can be broken. And then we have the small slice of green that'll show up on the pie chart. That's part of this analysis. That's, well, what's exempt? Homestead, maybe some ERISA plans. That's a federal exemption, but it's usually not a big slice. And then on page 2 of the report, it's what we call our exemption protection potential. Using the modeling with the retirement modeling, using, modeling with the exemption and understanding, horizon, again, income to asset ratio. Well, how much might we be able to recharacterize of this person's balance sheet as exempt for retirement purposes? Okay. And then nothing that we do ever in terms of implementing would not have an accompanying solvency affidavit. And on that solvency affidavit, we also include the net worth statement of the client and any particular findings after review of litigation that might be either pending, threatened, or expected. We've had some doctors, they have 5 lawsuits against them at all times. Can't wait for them to not have any lawsuits to plan for them, or they'll never have a plan. So we have to vet it and look at what the claims are. Some of them are just named because they're part of a doctor group. They didn't even see a patient, right? And so we have to identify and vet what the risk is. And we have what's called a contingent liability analysis that we conduct using an old case called In Re Zonex. It's a 1988 bankruptcy court case that establishes, well, we can create or come up with a contingent liability based on the probability of success against the client and the claim times the amount of the claim gives us a number to set aside and say, hey, look, we respected these things. We're not going to do anything to trigger what we call a Uniform Voidable Transactions Act, voidable transfer. And so that's all part of that solvency. And I've been to court on that. And judges seem to embrace the idea that we respect what's going on around the client. Now, next page, please. We're going to talk about just a basic case study. Here we have a $8 million net worth client, Linda. She lives in LA. That's relevant to the homestead exemption. You'll see over on the left-hand side, there's a list of her assets. I won't get into the laundry list of her assets, but you can get some idea. She's got cash, she's got some property. We know what her income is. She's single. She has no kids. She's got a 401k, so she has some existing retirement, but she has an IRA. IRAs are not exempt in California. They're only exempt to what we call necessity for support under state law. You have to go to bankruptcy to get a fat exemption to apply to IRAs. And that's $1 million plus cost of living. I think it's 1.3 or something like that now. Would be exempt, but you got to file to get that. So IRAs in and of themselves, if enforced in state court, are not treated the same as in bankruptcy. So be mindful of that. But if we take all of her assets, we take her income, horizon to retirement, she's looking to retire at age 65. Her pre-PRT exposure is, in other words, before doing anything, if again, she was that situation where there was a judgment rendered and the creditor was looking at her balance sheet with their glasses, they would see only 13% of her estate is exempt under the codes. That means 87% of it is exposed. Now, using the modeling and everything we talked about, we could potentially recharacterize or make exempt up to 89%. Now, would we go that high? Probably not. We could justify it, but we wouldn't go that high. Why? Because we're pigs, we're not hogs. Because pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in being bacon. For them to fry up in a pan. No, we're smart about it, but it's nice to show, hey, we could have done this much, but we only did this much. So again, those are all little factors that play into the totality of the circumstances that the court looks at the end of the day, right? And so we want to be thoughtful of those things. Next page, please. So here's a copy. This is an illustration of the calculator. I knew you guys wanted to see it because I was trying to create it in my head for you or in your heads to say, what does this look like? Well, this is what it looks like. This is the page one. This is your creditor exposure report, right? And that's her world in red, yellow, and green. So you can see it. I don't have to reiterate the numbers. They're there. Next page, please. And this is the exemption protection potential report. So you see the green is expanded and the blue is more what we call strategic exemption planning. That's the protection of the future values, future earnings, and tax savings. Okay, next page, please. So, like I said, in the process, when we're implementing a PRT, we have to have what's called a retirement appraisal. Now, the retirement appraisal integrates exemption diagnostics along with traditional retirement planning modeling, right? So all of that, I've trained an individual. His name is Dave Jones. He works at Yosemite Capital. He's a really smart guy. He's an ex-engineer with Hewlett-Packard for 21 years. And he has an amazing mind that was able to model this stuff out using Monte Carlo simulations and standard deviations and all this gobbledygook that I could never explain if I really had to and my life depended on it. So I leave that up to him. I stay in my lane. The point is that process results in the prove up of exactly what it is that we can say, hey, we need to set this amount aside for retirement. And these particular assets are cash flowing and appropriate funds. So it's also identification of those assets that this process helps to create. And it sets the stage for the retirement story. All right, judge is going to look at all these numbers like I would look at all these numbers, and my eyes are going to go in the back of my head. Or my eyes will start growing hair. I call that the fuzzy eyeball syndrome. When you stare at something for so long and don't blink that your eyes grow hair. That's what happens to me when I look at too many spreadsheets all at once. I think a lot of the lawyers in here can sympathize. But the story is in simple English is what we're putting in here. And this is how it's going to be used and perform and why. That I can understand. And I think any judicial officer that reviews that will have some understanding of why what's in there is in there. And it's not just some arbitrary spaghetti against the wall process. Next page, please. And so the PRT has, well, like anything, a recipe, right? It has ingredients that it needs to have, well, to work for it to, well, to truly do what it's supposed to do. And under the code, it doesn't tell us specifically what it's supposed to have. You got to look at the case law and follow the breadcrumbs. And I spent the last 10 years of my life reading a lot of cases, which we, Brown and Streza, are proud to have compiled over a 700-page, what I call PRT Retirement Planning Essentials Manual, which has briefed every single case ever adjudicated in California or in the Ninth Circuit on this particular statute. And we have hyperlinked by topic, all these cases and dicta, so we know exactly what to turn to in terms of what the court has said on any particular item that's in question. That's within the firm and to be used only by the firm, but it speaks volumes to the level of in-depth research that we have done on this subject. Now, the trust is, it's basically, well, the vehicle that holds the assets that are administered for the retirement of the individual, right? But there's a plan, and the plan is the actual exempt component. Trust is just the vehicle that holds the assets, and it's the plan the statute refers to, but it's the individual that holds the exemption. It's kind of interesting, right? You have to be a resident of California for this first. So some people always ask me, oh, I have a client in Nevada. Nope, doesn't work. Believe it or not, got to live here. You got to have a residence in California for this, which has kept some people in California. So I'm proud to say at least we have more tax dollars to expect just because of the PRT. Shared it with some people up in Sacramento, funny enough, because I'm lobbying ahead trying to keep this statute in place just in case this gets super popular and they decide they want to try and change it. But I don't think so. Not from what I've seen so far. Now, the PRT must be sponsored by an employer company, got to be an employee of the company. Now, it's either a company that exists already or one that we can create, right? It just depends, right? As long as we have business purpose, then we can create an entity that can sponsor in a plan, make you an employee. It has to be managed by an independent trustee or custodian. We have trustees that we use. We use the Hitchmans out of Newport. Hitchman fiduciaries. They're great. They're recommended by the court in contested conservatorship proceedings, which means they're battle tested. Don't shy away from adversity, which we like, because these can be tested, and we want to make sure that we have the right people behind it to test them. It's also the control component we talked about earlier, why there has to be a separation between the client and their trust. And this helps that create that right impression that this is for retirement purposes only. It's to provide retirement benefits only to, again, an employed person. See, again, you have to be an employee. The plans can be ERISA or non-ERISA. I don't do ERISA. And people say, well, why not? It's the federal exemption. It's powerful. Again, it imposes those limits, restrictions, prohibitions, and penalties that we're not crazy about. But it also does another thing. It invokes the jurisdiction of the Department of Labor on all disputes. Yay. Let's bring them all in and have a good time. No, thanks. There's no real need to do that. I don't see why. But, look, these plans have to have retirement characteristics to them, right? We have to have the documentation that supports, its retirement function, administration. Also has to have a schedule or a formula of payments to be made by the employee to their trust, because this is primarily privately funded. The company, like I said, seeds it. And then these trusts are individual to each employee and funded by their personal assets. But we have to have a schedule, and that's where that defined benefit funding agreement helps, as well as whatever assets that go into the PRT, that cash flow, all that shows that the trust is going to grow and meet its retirement purpose. But there's also a schedule of formula of payments to the participant at retirement. So that means pursuant to the adoption agreement, which we'll talk about, there's an election in there how often they want to receive their retirement, their exempt distributions. And again, we make sure that those are in a separate distribution account so that exemption can be preserved and maintained and not commingled with any other monies. But got to have a schedule or formula in there that's inherent in its basic requirements. Next page, please. So the plan itself, right, which is the item referenced under the statute, has to be sponsored by an employer company. Now, can be a wholly owned company. People always say, wait a minute, what do you mean? You mean a single shareholder, single director, single officer can create a PRT and it works? The answer is yes. And there's a case on this called the Cheng case. And that's the one that sent Judge Alan Ahart, who was a presiding bankruptcy court judge in Orange County, into a tizzy. He wrote what I call series of lamentations in 1995 to the Uniform Law Commission, complaining that how could it be this one person, this doctor, only employee of this company, can get the same benefits of a General Motors or an IBM, right? And how does that make any sense? And the court, or the courts and opinions that have referenced this, said, look, until the legislature decides to change the law and write in these restrictions, then they don't exist. I said, wow, well, that gives us a lot of foundation then to plan for folks that have only, wholly owned businesses. You can, but there's some disadvantages to being single member LLCs for holding entities anyway. Maybe if not for so much for operating companies, but there's a weakness in the statute that allows for a foreclosure against assets of single members by a creditor from the bottom up. So they protect from the top down, but at the bottom up. But the PRT can actually solve that problem by becoming a non-voting member and making it a multi-member for legal purposes, but it still stays single member for tax purposes because it's disregarded. Oh yeah, this stuff gets great, which is why I love going to work every day. But the plan has to do some certain things. It has to establish policies and procedures, eligibility requirements, what contributions are permitted or not permitted, recharacterization of the assets that are funded as retirement assets, options regarding the distributions. All this stuff is done up front. Plan loans, like we said, there are loans available. I'm a little more conservative, don't have to, but there are good reasons to do them. And frankly, they can do some extra good. For instance, a client said, look, I have a lot of cash. And I don't want to leave it exposed on my exposed balance sheet. Really would like to put it in this retirement vehicle, but my business needs some money. He said, well, PRT can loan you the money. Now, it'll be at commercially reasonable interest rates, but we can put a lien on assets inside the company, like accounts receivables and equipment, in favor of your PRT that protects those now from business creditors. It was a valid arrangement, and as long as they're respecting it and paying on it, the Bloom case says that works. And that's another Ninth Circuit case. As far as loans, and as long as respecting loans and those being okay, not necessarily loans to a company. Administrative matters, those are all put into as far as policies and procedures in the retirement plan itself as well. Next page, please. So the trust, the PRT itself, again, it's the vehicle that holds the assets. It's created for the benefit of the participant. So one per employee, again, privately funded exemption protection vehicle. It holds the retirement assets, administers those retirement assets for the benefit of the participant. It does contain customized provisions, and those can be based on the individual needs of the participant beneficiaries. It establishes the policies and procedures for administration of the retirement assets, such as the funding and distributions. There's some neat stuff in there that can accommodate unforeseen circumstances. Let's put it that way. Requires skill and proficient PRT integrated team to realize. It truly does. We built this in a way that it was fully functional and handled or addressed all of the issues that we believed were germane to a successful retirement plan. Next page, please. So the adoption agreement, that's what sets the plan in motion. The company adopts it, the sponsoring company. It's designed to designate plan benefit participants. So in there, we can identify those that are participating now, and that can be amended later and added. We can add more. It's not a static vehicle. This thing is designed to ebb and flow with the situation and circumstances of the company and the client. It does specify particular terms, such as, well, when retirement age is, any particular vesting options, and again, enforcing permitted contributions. Next page, please. So proper structure, funding, and administration requires, well, collaboration and some extensive coordination. And the integrated team that we've created with different capacities in the trust, just like you'll see in a lot of advanced planning structures that make it all work better, right? We have a team that helps to create that. Next page, please. So here we'll see all the boxes and all the different capacities inside the PRT. So up top, you have the participant, you have the retirement appraiser, if you will. We call him retirement planner. His function is just to create the appraisal. We have over to the right, the Pylortes. I gave this thing a neat little Greek theme, trying to be different. So you'll see a lot of the references or some of the references to Greek things. The Pylortes is no different than a trust protector. And that's typically me, somebody that, well, has written the document and knows what it's supposed to say and mean, interpreting the meaning of the document. It also can change trustees. A lot of the traditional functions, amend the plan, amend the trust, things the client can't hold powers to do. And if they did, it would destroy it. So just like other irrevocable trust structures, and this is an irrevocable trust, like a secular trust for retirement. All right, and then you have the Nestor, and the Nestor is just a fancy name for investment advisor. Again, directing the trustee underneath that with respect to how to invest. And that's a powerful tool because the client may want to build their monster, I should say, off of the grid in their protected balance sheet. And that's, you're capable of doing that. Creating more wealth in a protected form as opposed to exposing it on your exposed balance sheet. You have the administrator, which is just a support company. We use my company, Retirement Exemption Administrators, Inc. It's simply a support company that helps the trustee, keeps the trustee's fees down. But that annual administration is basically paid to this administrator and covers the trustee's fees, the CPA fees, because there are grantor returns that are produced. They're just information returns because it's, again, grantor trust. employee grantor trust. So that just gets picked up, any income, losses, gains of that client will be picked up on the individual's balance sheet. And there's provisions inside the trust that if, let's say, there's a major asset that got liquidated and there's tax liability, then the trust could pay its fair share as opposed to you, the participant, if it makes sense, but that's a conversation. Because we always want to keep everything on the protected side there and protected if we can. And again, the trustee is important, and it's a major linchpin in this to ensure that things get done and done right. And everything is produced to the administrator that's needed to give to the participant CPA so they can do their good work. Next page, please. So people ask, well, what can I put in a PRT? What can it be funded with? So the typical assets that are appropriate to fund are, we can use phantom stock benefits, supplemental executive retirement plan benefits, SERPs. Those are great because those are just exposed retirement benefits and we can protect those. Cash, that's easy. Stocks and bonds, low-hanging fruit. Life insurance and annuities, when applied for with retirement supplement purposes. And we're actually right now in the process of creating a split dollar PRT that will allow for protection of, because when a particular life insurance policy is funded for purposes of eventually providing a tax-free retirement benefit back to the client, and a lot of clients do that. All that cash value, if it's not in the PRT, a big chunk of it is exposed to creditors. I think if you're married, the exemption's like 20 grand of cash value. It's next to nothing. But if we use a life insurance product that is specifically for retirement supplement and bifurcate the death benefit, that annihilate and keep the cash value in the PRT for purposes of providing a retirement supplement benefit to the client, then we can do that. Real estate investments, that's a no-brainer. A lot of clients with real estate naked, not even in LLCs. And that's kind of cool because then we can put the property into the trust, which by the way, does not trigger a reappraisal because it's in a trust for the benefit of the grantor, which is an exclusion, I should say, from reassessment, not a change of ownership. And then move that up into an LLC. And well, then that could be managed by the client. Probably the trustees don't want to run clients' businesses. They just want to hold the non-voting equity and be assured that they receive a retirement benefit at retirement, which requires the operating agreements of these LLCs to be repurposed for that purpose. So there's some legal work for you lawyers if you have clients that need PRTs, and LLCs are going to be natural byproducts of that process. And then promissory notes, those are great. Those cash flow, those are low-hanging fruit to a creditor to the extent that they want one or want it. Business profits, corporate stocks, notes receivables, commercial property. Again, a lot of it has to do with how is this asset going to contribute in some way to paying a retirement benefit to that client. That's kind of the basic, analysis. Next page. Now the question becomes, what can't you put into this thing? Well, you can't put your Ferrari into this thing. That doesn't work. Your boat, your RV, right? Those kind of things, vacant land. Look, unless you're going to sell it and it's part of your retirement story, it doesn't belong in there, is the bottom line. Now the primary residence, yeah, you can't put your house in here. Although people go, well, that's part of my retirement need. Well, of course, that's understood, but it doesn't cash flow unless you're going to sell it. It doesn't make any sense. It's not going to produce a retirement benefit. However, again, using our defined benefit funding agreement, we can protect the excess equity over the homestead and any loans. So keep that in mind. Same with vacation homes. That becomes a neat little tool for protecting those as well. But yeah, Ferraris, classic cars, yachts, those kind of things. They're not fits for the PRT. Next page, please. Now, annual PRT administration, every year we meet with the client, with the participants individually. There's multiple participants. We have a lot of law firms, trucking companies. That's a big one. We're going to be actually presenting to the trucking association because of the exposure to business owners that run trucking companies. All the trucks are employees, even if they're in separate corporations under AB 5. So a lot of them are, but the point is we'll meet with them independently, individually, annually to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do inside the plan. That's the other function of the administration company is they'll send out notices to the client. They have 60 days and 30 days before their obligation payment, their funding obligation payment is due. So they'll make it on time. It's like anything in estate planning. I can't tell you how many times I'm just going to go off on a rant for a second. That a lot of estate planning that's done is not respected. Installment agreements to the, that are done out, to defective grantor trusts, payments that are made under gift contract arrangements that are due every year. We'll call the client and say, did you make your payment? What payment? Oh, well, how long have you been making your payments? Oh, a couple of years. Is that a problem? Well, only if the IRS audits you. So like anything, sometimes you have to help the client help themselves. And so part of that administration is to take care of that. But we'll meet with them, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. And look, sometimes things change. The annual funding might be needed to be modified. Why? They're making more money. They've acquired more assets. Well, we can justify more without being hogs, of course. And we evaluate the retirement appraisal again in light of the participants' changed circumstances, change, like I said, net worth change, income change, expenses. And I foresee a lot of that just because of the distressed environment that's coming up, so we'll do what we have to do. We'll do what we need to do to make sure the client can benefit to the greatest extent without jeopardizing the integrity of what we're putting together. Next page, please. So the result is that we can protect the participant's retirement asset by recharacterizing them from non-exempt to exempt under this particular statute. Right. And again, to be mindful that, next page, please. We have to properly design and use the PRT. We have to make sure that what we've put in it is going to contribute in some way to paying retirement benefit to the client, and that we administer them annually to make sure that they're maintained in all compliance with applicable laws. And next page, looks like I'm right on the money. So we do offer a complimentary consultation for you or your clients, 30 minutes. I call it PRT primer. And it's 6 slides and it just recaps everything. And sometimes clients want to hear about it. And certainly I'm willing to do that for you as a benefit for you and your client. Just to let you know, we do have a newsletter that we publish every month. There's now 12 articles up on our website that I've published, co-authored with my litigation associate. I'll keep near and dear, because she's very important when we're dealing with a situation where there's potential issues surrounding a client. I call those clients with hair. But she's awesome. But anyway, if you want all aspects, questions, a lot of the stuff can be answered reading those articles. I think you guys have a copy of the Bloomberg article I recently published. That's not a bad read. And we're more than happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir. Yeah, they're tax-free distributions, I should say. Oh, I'm sorry. The question is can you describe the tax aspects of distributions and how they're to be treated? And because the PRT is tax neutral, you're going to pick up any of the gains or losses or income or anything like that on your particular 1040 using the grantor returns. So it's already accounted for in those distributions is the answer. Next question. When is it too late to do a PRT? It's a facts and circumstances answer. No, there's no age limitation. Well, that's the issue. If they're already retired and not active in any trade or business, it's too late to do a PRT. But I have lots of clients up into their 80s that are still active in their businesses, and meaning I'm not retiring yet. And what does retirement mean? Can anybody answer that for me? What's the definition of retirement? Yes, sir. To go away. I think you could go away very comfortably and protected if you do one of these correctly. The real answer is most people don't ever retire. They just want to be able to say at this moment in time, I'm going to start receiving some, well, exempt retirement benefits. And so because this is non-qualified, we're not subject to those same rules of, well, ERISA. Yes.
So is there any unclean about the protector there?
There's like 3 questions in that. So what was the first one again? Because I'm operating on very little sleep after taking my teenagers around last night and getting here super early. And 4 cups of coffee, so I'm zinging on top of it. Yes. How many of these cases have been created? All right. So I've personally been involved in creating dozens of these over the years. I've been to court on a couple of them, and they've fared very well under very unfavorable circumstances. But again, that has a lot to do with, in some cases, the quality of the adversary in terms of, who's coming after you, in terms of pleadings. And, the case law is pretty clear on what it looks for and how these can be, attacked. And I've actually been hired to attack them as well as protect them, and actually makes you better when you go after the very thing that you create. It can only make it better. But again, retirement purpose is probably the most paramount destroyer of these. In other words, when they're done last minute and there's a catastrophic litigation that's coming like a tidal wave, chances are your bamboo hut is not going to survive the hit. That's just reasonable and, practical. And a subjective intent. If you go into a deposition and you say, I did this for asset protection, you're dead. That's one of my articles, pulling the hand grenade pin on the PRT. It's actually one of the articles. I invite you to read it. And it's based on the Gluck case, which was a recent case. Where everything you did is basically an example of everything not to do when you do a PRT. So that's why I say these have to be done very with precision, with a lot of real good thought, with the case law behind every decision you make. And if there's tumultuous waters, you got to vet them and make sure that in doing something, you're not going to make a situation worse. Now, just for perspective, my firm, me and Heather and my team were hired by other bankruptcy law firms, notables, to review asset protection planning that other folks have done. And a lot of them, I would say 80–90% are going to fail when they go into court, because there's a lot of problems with planning, or they're not respecting the clients, what they've created, or transfers for no consideration. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that are just, you look at and go, oh gosh, I wouldn't go into court with that. Under the appropriate circumstances, yeah, we just don't advertise that, we can go into these with the mindset that we're going to terminate them. Because again, that power to destroy is going to destroy the PRT. Yeah. Yes, sir. Artwork is art. The question is, are artwork or collectibles good assets to fund the PRT? Only if you're going to sell them. They're not, unless they're, I don't know, put into a fund and there's cash flow off of it. The point is that it's cash flowing assets that are appropriate for the PRT. Because again, anything that goes in there, we have to be able to tell as part of the retirement story, it's going to produce a retirement benefit to the client. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So, I am
individuals, they're gonna be putting a lot of money into this PRT. So I expect then a lot of it's gonna flow out in the retirement years. So does that money that flows out of the PRT, is that then accessible to creditors?
Yeah, the question is the money flowing out of the PRT accessible to creditors? And the answer is no. Why? Because that's the distribution component of the exemption. Remember, all amounts held in the process of being distributed or the death benefit are all exempt under the statute. Exempt meaning protected from money judgments. What does the exemption protect against? Money judgments. So we're clear. Yes, sir. Ideal clients are business owners, high-end employees making 250,000 or more a year. Net worth, sweet spot, about 8 million and above. Have some investable assets, cash, real estate. Those numbers are not hard to get to, especially around here.
Transfer any existing insurance policies?
If they're repurposed, can be repurposed for retirement. I prefer to do new ones.
Yeah.
Because the paperwork that supports their retirement purpose is more clear. But yeah, they can be. Oh, a couple of questions online. Yes.
First one is, IRA be contributed to the PRT?
The question is, can an IRA be contributed to a PRT? And the answer is no. That's a tax deferred vehicle and the PRT is tax neutral. So the answer is no. You'd have to pull money out. And I've had clients say, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave my IRA exposed. I have all these unharvested losses. You know, then maybe you pull out what's in the IRA, take advantage of those losses and contribute them into your PRT.
And
Yes.
the other one is, can assets be transferred to PRT, which then creates LLC with all the assets, real estate and non-real estate, and client managers LLC.
Yeah, the answer, the question is, can you put assets into the PRT, real estate, investments, and things, and create LLCs? Create LLCs within the PRT. The answer is yes. And can the clients manage those particular LLCs? And the answer is yes. Again, the PRT only wants, the PRT trustee only wants non-voting equity in whatever vehicle that's created with an assurance that they receive their retirement benefit at retirement. So there'll be mandatory distribution provisions in the operating agreements and limited partnership agreements that say at retirement, cash is coming out. And that's how we can show that these are repurposed properly in retirement. All right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me. Hopefully you learned something neat. I'm here at your disposal. If you have any other questions, let me know. Thank you Bill for having me.
Dustin, thanks so very much. Boy, here's the guy that's the expert, the technician, and the inventor of this, following the California statute. And obviously you're hearing, a lot about him, but really also about the Brown and Strazer firm. We're talking about dotting T's or dotting I's, crossing T's, doing it right, being reasonable, practical. He's certainly the guy to reach out to if you have folks that fit into this arena. Remember, our next meeting is in December. Don't forget that. That's with Jenny Bratton and Helen Cheng of Withers Worldwide on year-end charitable planning and other planning for charitable purposes. And thanks so much for coming, and appreciate the leeway in dealing with traffic disasters. Brandon came through, the intrepid traveler there, and we'll see you next month.